Handle that. My wife, you know,
How'd she do?
she probably left it up.
Where was it at? Where?
Cloverdale?
Oh, Cloverdale.
If you dish it out, I'm gonna get it.
That's a
Yeah.
very nice place. My,
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order this public meeting of the Board of Johnson County Commissioners on this 25th day of January 2021 at 10 o'clock a.m. Please pray with us if you care to, and then we'll stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Would you bow with me for a moment? Dear Heavenly Father, we need you every day, and it seems like here lately we need you even more each and every day. We understand that your thoughts are higher than ours. That's the reason we pray your will be done. Dear Lord, I just want to pray for all the unborn. Just pray that no man will avoid the birth and the creation of such precious items that you have created. Be with us as we make our decisions for the county today, dear Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Health Department approval of 2021 attorney contract.
Yeah, Betsy's not able to make it today, but this is the same as last year.
Move to approve, sir.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Court Administrator, Office of Judicial Administration Grant Award for 2021.
Brandy Kirkendall, Court Administrator, just here to let you know about this year's grant award the courts have applied for and received in the amount of $45,627. That's an increase of about $4,000 over the 2020 award, but our expenses were higher. Last year we were lucky enough to cover it all with the grant, hoping that that stays the same this year.
Thank you.
Move to approve.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Any further?
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Community Corrections, approval of RFP for GPS equipment 2021 and Department of Correction grants.
Jason Penny, Executive Director of Community Connections. So this year, our GPS equipment that we use to run home detention on is being phased out because the 5G towers will no longer support the older equipment. We've had it for about 10 years at this point in time. We also believe that when the previous administration purchased it, it was basically BI or nothing, which is the company that we have. Since that period of time, there has been a significant increase in competition, and we actually believe that we will be able to get better equipment that does more for us in supervising the people for less money than we currently have. It just makes sense at this point in time to be able to do our RFP for new equipment, in which we would work with the county attorneys to be able to do it, to complete, and then be able to see what it is. The adult committee of our board would be in charge of helping out the new equipment. We would hope that we'd be able to start that process in February, have an idea by March, and be able to be in the new equipment by the end of March or beginning of April. So, any questions?
Have a motion and a second. Are we on just number one?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure clarification. Have a motion second. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, sir.
Thank you. This is for information for the community corrections grants from the DOC. So at the end of last year, they did not do another call for proposals for another application. What they did is they extended our grant another 6 months. So we didn't have to do an application. I believe that probably what will actually end up happening this year is that they're going to extend it until the very end of this year to get us back on the calendar year like they had. So this is going to be way far away, but we're asking for approval at this point in time to be able to apply for the DOC grant. And then when it is if they give us an extension or whatnot, then we will come before you to ask for the approval to be able to spend those grant funds.
Okay, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah. And Jason,
Yes.
with this grant, all funding cuts off at the end of that grant.
So that is how it usually works, and that's why I was telling you that. So usually how it would work at the, like by this time, the 2020 grant would have been cut off, but since they extended it out, so we still have funding from the 2020 grant through the first 6 months of 2021. And I believe that they're probably going to be doing another grant extension to the very end of this year, depending on what happens at the state and everything like that.
Okay.
They were just unsure, so, but yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to get that out there for everybody.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, sir.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Animal control. Ordinance 2021-0-2, first reading.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to be on your agenda today. I'm here to request a change in fee structure when it comes to animal euthanasia. We've contacted multiple vets, not only throughout Johnson County, but also our donor counties. And what they charge for euthanasia, what we charge, we're undercutting the vets and taking business away from them, which is, I don't think we should be in the business of doing. So what we propose is to raise the euthanasia fees to make it more palatable for someone to take their animal to a licensed vet for that animal to be put down. Now, on situations, say if the animal comes in, it's been very, it's mauled someone, and that animal can't be safely quarantined anywhere else, then of course we'll still continue with euthanizing animals in that situation. But for things like animals that are terminally ill, or need to really see a vet before a decision is made for that animal we put down, or for what is termed convenience euthanasia, people going on vacation and they don't want to spend the money to have an animal boarded, they'd rather just have it put down. This would make us kind of out of reach for most of those individuals, but also give them the option of going to a vet who would charge them less.
The only problem I have with your proposed fee increases, which are substantial, obviously, is that there should be some monetary consideration for what you do in relation to the fact that you have a tax rate to support your labor in your department. So, and I understand not wanting to undercut local businesses, but at the same time, the taxpayers are paying you to administer the shots or whatever you do in regard to that. Are you giving any consideration to that? In other words, when you say $250 for a dog over 50 pounds or an animal over 50 pounds, and if that's comparable to what a local veterinarian facility would charge,
Actually, it's higher.
it is higher?
Yeah, you can,
But you're tax supported. You're supposed to be providing a service for the taxpayers. I don't know why you would be higher than a general practice.
well, what we've seen, Ron, is that individuals are coming to us rather than vets to have their animals put down.
But that's part of the service you provide as a tax.
I don't think that's part of the service we
No.
should be in business to do anyway. That's a veterinarian's job, not our job at the
Yeah,
animal
we-
shelter. I don't know why we're ever putting down an animal unless it's an emergency case.
Well, then, in that case, then you should just not do it.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what we're trying to get at, that we don't really want to be in the business of putting animals down. There's nothing in that I read in the ordinance that says that we even should put animals down, except for cases of suspected rabies.
Yeah.
So,
Why don't we just strengthen our ordinance and just not put animals down?
with probably the exception of an animal that's been quarantined there for a bite case.
Just understood.
Yeah.
That's a decision we can make at that time and just,
Yes, sir.
anybody else turn them away if we can.
And that's not a fee-based procedure there. You're doing it for whatever humane reasons or whatever.
And I agree with what you're saying, but it's not, we shouldn't be in the business
Well, if we shouldn't be in the business, then I think we should strike that and not have a rate for it. And that kind of takes you out of the business.
Unless you've got an emergency situation.
Which he's
Or
saying,
unique
so that
situation.
would be a call that the director would make,
Yeah, he would make
or the
that.
animal shelter itself would make.
In this sort of situation like it, what we have found in our research is 1% of individuals perform over 90% of the euthanasias in the United States. And that 1% are animal shelter workers. And so you have a huge turnover, you have a lot of mental issues, compassion fatigue.
I don't think that should be in their
Yeah.
job description. I don't know how you guys do what you do, let alone have to do that too.
Thank you, sir.
I think we're asking way too much of our employees in the county to do that.
It's hard, particularly when you have a healthy animal that someone wants to be put down, causing them to go on vacation. That's hard.
That should
That
be a
must be
yellow
recent.
offense is what that should be.
That must be recent. So do we want to do this first reading, or do you want to strike this and
You can go ahead and table it if you want. We'll go back to the drawing board with some revisions and bring it back to your next meeting for first reading.
I mean, I'm okay with that.
We need a motion to table.
Yes, please.
I'd make a motion to table this until next meeting and get some changes.
There's a motion second to table. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that's, is that it, Sheena? Okay, thank you very much.
Let's see what we can do to protect our little fur friends.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You know, with all things, there comes a responsibility. It's just, I don't know, you guys just run my day. It irks me. Highway Department, hi, Luke, speaking of running my day.
Thought I was gonna get to run today. Dang it.
They
You know
should,
better-
yeah.
You know better than that. You know we love you.
Luke Maston, Highway Director. First item under Highway Department business is a request to approach the county council at their upcoming meeting in February for 3 additional appropriations. Those were outlined in the memo that was provided. However, there is one minor change. The third item on that list, which is the appropriation of the fees for our CardGraph software update, actually needs to come out of a 3,000 series line item, not a 4,000 series. So we'll be changing that miscellaneous equipment to professional services, but it will still come out of the same fund.
I got a question for Luke.
Okay.
Looking at the map that you've given us and delineating the annex or the acquisition parcel, why wouldn't we go ahead and try to purchase all we need to get us connected to Wakefield? It looks like you're stopping way short there.
The northern boundary there in yellow is actually the north property line of that Speedway parcel. So it ends at the creek. And then on the other side of the creek, that property is owned by someone else. So this acquisition would get us as far north as we can get on Speedway parcel to extend that road in the future. But there will be other properties on the other side of the creek in the future that will have to look at acquiring right of way, but that's going to be entirely dependent on what that final layout of the road with the alignment is.
So what you're saying is if we get it right this moment, we need to kind of jump the gun on what we may or may not need.
Yes, absolutely.
Not wisely spent.
This keeps our options open on what would be a very expensive project. Hopefully keep those costs down once we reach that point.
And it has taken a while to get to this point.
Yes.
So I would make a motion to approve with the changes that Luke had mentioned, series funding.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, sir. Number 2.
Item number 2 is the request for a bid date for our 2020-2 community crossings projects. These are the projects that we were awarded in November of last year, I believe. We are requesting a bid date for those projects of your meeting on March 8th at 3 p.m. We are currently looking at potentially breaking this out into a couple different contracts just due to the amount of work and the time frame that we have to close the project out with NDOT. We will identify how many contracts, before we send the bid packets out, it'll be prepared accordingly. So at your meeting, we may be reading more than one group of bids.
Move to approve.
Second. Have a motion second. Any further? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Luke.
I'll stay if you need me to, or I will happily leave.
Just,
Darn, you better stay.
Okay.
You can leave.
I just have.
That's my vote. Board of Commissioners approval of impact fee interlocal agreement with Town of Bargersville.
So we have been working with Bargersville in conjunction with getting the impact fee ordinance figured out and the study that we've done to calculate those fees. There's also a need to have an interlocal agreement with the town, since we will both be collecting fees separately to identify how those fees are going to be combined and how we're going to move forward with the projects that were identified in that impact fee study. So this interlocal agreement is the culmination of that work and that negotiation with the town. I would be happy to answer any questions.
The first thought I had when I was reading through this is, and this is something that we've faced in the past, where the county would make certain road improvements and then shortly thereafter, some local unit, government unit would annex that area. Should we not have some provision in this agreement that if we use our impact fee dollars to improve a certain area, that there should be some prohibition for, that would prevent Bargersville from annexing it after we do that? Now, I know in the current agreement, there is an agreement that we would continue to keep us in our road inventory, those areas that are currently annexed. But I'd like to see something going forward. If we use our impact fee dollars, several thousands of dollars to make certain road improvements, that we should be protected from them coming in and annexing that area.
So one of the challenges that we've had in coming to an agreement on terms is the issue that we are collecting separate fees. But we have projects that are identified in the study that are in unincorporated Johnson County or in Bargersville's town limits. So in terms of who funds which projects, ultimately, we're funding all of the projects together. We identified, hopefully, a 50-50 split of every project phase for every project that we move forward. Because Bargersville will have their portion of the revenue that's collected, we'll have our portion. Once we start a phase, that money will be, that phase cost will be transferred to us, and we will handle the project management. So it's not necessarily an issue of we would spend only our money on only our projects. We're combining these two funds to address the study projects that were identified as a whole. So in terms of concerns about future annexations, because we've put money out, if revenue is collected like we're hoping, Bargersville will have just as much money in every project, whether it's in Bargersville's town limits or outside of Bargersville's town limits as we do.
So how do you address a shortfall? In other words, you got the project and they have not collected enough fees to match our 50% of the funding. I think I read something through there that you would seek additional funds.
So the goal, if everything works perfectly, which it won't, is we collect relatively the same amount of fees and can fund projects at that 50-50 split. We may, and honestly probably will, have periods in time where Bargersville is collecting more fees than the county, or where the county is collecting more fees than Bargersville. One of my main concerns is what you just mentioned. What happens if we're ready to start the next phase of a project and one of us doesn't have what we need for our 50%? So we've added some language in here to give us some flexibility on project phases. Should that situation arise, we can adjust that funding percentage to closer to what we have available or what we have been receiving. If it's not 50-50, if it's 60-40 or whatever, we've got that flexibility in here to adjust that participation percentage should we run into that problem for every single project phase.
Yeah, I understand that what you're proposing there is future collections. In other words, you're committing future collections to do the offset. I'm more concerned with, let's say you got a project and you have just enough money to meet your 50%. They can only meet like 25%. So you're gonna have to come up with that other 25%. Well, let me reverse that. Let's say they got the 50, we got the 25. And you need to make up the difference and to get the project done because you can't wait to collect the future and then go do it. How would you get that other 25%?
So there's a couple options there. One would be, and this is something that we're gonna have to keep an eye on as we go, is projecting what our future revenue is gonna be. So if we start a design contract, we don't pay all of that money up front. So we're gonna have to have an idea of how long is it gonna take us to collect the revenue that we owe for that phase, if it's 50%, versus when do we think we'll actually have to pay those dollars out. So that's part of it is gonna be being able to use those projections before we even implement that phase to see if we can even meet our 50%. It's not necessarily gonna be we have 50% or 25% on hand. The other issue, or the other part of that would be, let's say we've completely overshot our revenue estimates and neither of us are making what we had anticipated. At that point, we just have to delay project phases until we're confident that we'll have the money in place to complete it.
But being confident that you're gonna have the money versus having the money, my question is, are you gonna delay the project until those future fees are collected? Or are you gonna supplement that in anticipation of paying it with future fees?
Well, at the moment, they're in the agreement, that phase would ultimately have to be delayed, the start of that phase.
So the project will just be delayed until you collect the fees?
Well, or until we're confident we have enough in the bank, plus what we're projecting to go ahead and get that phase started. So it'll be a mixture of, we've got some cash on hand and we're projecting revenue, we can go ahead, between those two things, we can go ahead and get the project phase started.
That's kind of what I was trying to get to, the cash on hand use.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes a sticking point.
Well,
Because the cash on hand, would you have to go to the council for appropriation of the use of that?
yes,
And what if they deny it?
then the funding stays in the
It's
impact fee
there,
fund, it's not intermingled.
So that's just one of the concerns I had in reading through this, is on this funding and appropriations of money and the availability of money going forward.
Potentially, how we choose to start those phases, I mean, that's up in the air. What I've mentioned is if we're concerned about that, we want to wait until we have that cash for our 50%, we can do that. And just delay the start of that particular project phase until that money is there, until that revenue is there.
And one of the things I think for clarification is we're not talking about routine road maintenance here. We're talking projects.
Yes.
That was, I'm sure somebody would have had a concern there if you're cutting off or delaying road maintenance. These are for
This is a completely separate
particular
revenue
programs
source.
or
Yeah.
projects, yeah. Well, thanks, Luke.
And I want to remind Commissioner West, this will be reviewed every 5 years.
Actually, 4.
Is it 4?
We won't be here in 5 years.
No.
Hey,
I mean,
wait a minute.
I doubt any of this stuff gets off the ground before really the first time.
That's the reason I gotta get all mine in now.
Good point, sir.
I'm gonna move to approve.
Further discussion on it? I see you looking at your notes there.
No, I'm going back to the fairness of the impact fee and how it's applied. I still contend that it's somewhat discriminatory in the application where you take a single-family residence and you're paying $2,500 or $2,600 roughly. And if it's only one person living there versus 8 people living there, your road trips are significantly different. The same problem I had with the wheel tax.
Is there a way to equal that out or to project equaling that out?
We're not,
Because
no,
that kind
because
of brings that.
with the statute, the way it is, that the ultimate result of the study is a per trip impact fee that's calculated. And the one thing to keep in mind is this both helps and possibly supports what your concern is this is an average, right? So yes, that house, single family home that has 3 kids and they're running a soccer practice, they're gonna be over their trips per day, absolutely. That person that is single like me and tries not to leave the house, then I would be paying more, unfortunately. But what we can't do is predict that for each and every lot. One, who the first buyer is of a new home, and then 2, who is going to live there later? How many people will live there or won't live there? How many trips will they have? So it's not perfect by any means. Certainly not fair to someone who doesn't take a lot of trips, but it's intended to average as best we can those trips among all the different types of households.
I kind of thought maybe a square footage based rate or something of that nature may be more palatable, in as much as a single individual is not going to have a 4 or 5 bedroom, 4 bathroom home. And so the footprint of the home or the square footage would be considerably less probably than a family moving in with 4 kids. So I understand it's difficult to base it on equal fairness, I guess, overall.
Did we look at a square footage?
I don't know that that's an option on the residential side. It would ultimately depend on what's in the ITE manual, but what the ITE manual provides is an average number of trips per home type, I guess. So seeing that 10 trips or whatever that was, it was close to that, is what the ITE manual lists for a single family type home. They don't drill down any further than that in terms of residents, people living in the home, and drivers, or anything like that. Honestly, because the further you dive into that, the harder it's going to be to make correlations and predictions. Somebody may have 3 kids who are under 16, and in 5 years they're over 16. You can't figure that out just by looking at the number of people that live there.
I got a question too on the developers' improvements to the streets or roads within a development. Does he get credit for the internal streets?
No.
just the external going to the subdivision?
Correct, but it would be any normal requirements that a new entrance to a neighborhood or a commercial or industrial development, those are separate from the impact fees. Those are still required, whatever they have to do at the entrance. They could choose, if they're in close proximity to one of the projects that was identified in the study, the developer could choose, instead of paying the fee, to help fund that project or complete that project. And that's where they would get credit
Right.
against what they would owe.
And that would just be up to the developers, how he wanted to rebate those back to future lot purchasers.
Yeah, that's definitely an option. There may be situations, depending on the location, where,
Yeah,
I mean, that's a money decision where a developer ultimately thinks that they could build it for less than what we've estimated their impact fee would be. But that's ultimately going to be their call and their proposal to us when they come in with their plans.
thanks, Luke.
Sure.
I know we have a motion on the floor, Luke, but just for a point of, I guess, clarification, why is this needed between us and the town of Margaret?
We joined together to do one impact fee study that encompassed both the unincorporated areas of White River Township and incorporated areas of Barkersville. Partly because we already handle road maintenance responsibilities, so a lot of those roads are already on our inventory. Another big part of that is we don't necessarily want to be competing with each other on these fees. The area is roughly the same, so what we're hoping is that this isn't necessarily a deterrent between someone building within Barkersville or in the unincorporated area of White River Township. The statutory requirement is that organizations, or government agencies that have planning jurisdiction, if there's more than one within that impact fee study area, they have to execute an interlocal agreement that essentially outlines what we're talking about here and how those funds would be spent.
So in essence, we could possibly be saving the taxpayers money by doing this, is the point I'm trying to get to. I mean, we're talking about spending taxpayer money and fees, but yet, in the way I look at it, I think, maybe I look at it too aggressively, but I look at it as maybe possibly saving taxpayers money down the road without all of the vision that we have with this.
Absolutely. We've worked very well with the town. Honestly, there are other entities, particularly around the Memphis area, that the town or a city it works in conjunction with the county for some services that we're providing. To my knowledge, there's been no joint study and joint implementation, and honestly, that is just a testament to how well that we work together with the town. As a taxpayer, it's nice to see that. But in terms of the fee itself, ultimately, we know what happens when you don't have development pay for the impacts that they have on the road. You can go 3 miles north of here and find out. So what we don't want to do at that point, it becomes much more expensive to the taxpayers to try to fix those projects, the problems, new projects further down the road, when we could have tried to tackle it as they would need it.
Thank you. And that's what I want, in all that we do, and the questions that Ron brings up, and Kevin and myself is we're always looking at the taxpayer in Johnson County, and sometimes with some things we do, I don't think the citizen actually realizes why we're doing what we're doing, and I like for them to hear that sometimes. And that's what I looked at when I saw this originally, it was two units working together to help. Then I think we should get more of that all over the county, and maybe we can help taxpayers save a little bit of money, or we can spend it more wisely, I guess. So I appreciate the questions Ron brings up, and they're legitimate questions, and I always listen to those. But I try to look at the progressive, positive side of it and move forward. So just my explanation,
Well,
so you understand.
And listen, I'm with Luke 100% in trying to work with other government units. We talked about mutually sharing equipment, one thing and another, trying to help both entities. But in regard to the taxpayers, keep in mind that the people that buy these homes are taxpayers in the county, and they are paying their MVH and local road and street money just like you and I, to preserve and maintain the existing roads. So they're already doing their share. So I just struggle again a little bit with that, but listen, I'm all for working together with other government units, and I commend Luke. He's done a great job of doing that. Not with all of them. Sometimes we have a little problem working with some of them. But,
No one is perfect.
I have a motion on the floor.
Is this, I got another, I'm gonna bring it up real quick, seeing that those are coming up to now, is I think it's, but I think that's under the ordinance, never mind.
That would be under the next one.
We have a second.
Motion, yeah, second. I'll second it. That's what I was waiting on. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next item is related to that. This would be the second reading of the impact fee ordinance. We have the first reading at your second meeting in December. Since a new fee is implemented, it requires 2 readings as well as a public hearing, which we held at your December meeting.
Well, you want me to bring it up
Yes,
again?
let's go ahead and. bring
Under
that down.
Exhibit C, paragraph 4.B, wording without payment for services, I still contend that needs to be stricken from that agreement. I talked to Luke, about everybody I've conversed with in that regard agrees that he simply cannot do that. And so my point is, if he cannot do it, then it shouldn't be in there.
So there's a couple of thoughts on that. One, in terms of can do it or cannot do it, that's probably something that needs legal clarification. I know some legal clarification or potentially some input from SBOA or DLGF. We may not be able to do that with the funding sources that we currently have. Now, we know the daunting list of projects ahead of us in that area related to I-69. And the current revenue sources that we have are not going to put a dent in any of those improvements that are needed, whether intersection improvements or road widening projects. So at some point, there will be discussion on finding other sources of revenue to get these projects finished. We don't know what those, specifically what those sources are going to be and what restrictions we may or may not have on the use of those funding sources as well. So even if the funding sources that we have right now, we find that we can't use them in that manner that's identified, future funding sources, that may not be the case. In addition to that, Zach and Sheena can probably touch on this better, but just because it's written in here, it doesn't mean that it supersedes any other statutory limitations that we may find exist. If it's not allowed by statute or by opinions we get from downtown, then that's not something that we can ultimately do.
And again, I go back to the premise that how much work would you do for another government entity and not get paid for it? Are we talking $1? Are we talking $1 million? there's no clarification there of how much you're willing to do, or how much the county, not you necessarily, although you are the one going back and forth with the street superintendent down there. How much work are you willing to do with county money that you're not going to get reimbursed for on another government entity's roads?
For some sort of action that we're not allowed to do by statute, the answer is $0.
So
If
doesn't this then become moot?
It could be moved under the current revenue sources that we have.
Well, I'm not talking MVH and LRS money, I'm talking about a bond as an example. It's still Johnson County taxpayer dollars. And how much of that would you be willing to do from Bargersville, as I say Bargersville, because that's who we're talking about here, and not get reimbursed for it?
I think that kind of goes back to what we discussed a little bit ago in the interlocal discussion for the impact fees, in that what we're doing is providing ourselves flexibility. In that particular situation, all we have right now is estimates on what our impact fee revenue is going to be. It may be more, it may be less. So we build flexibility into how project phases are done so that we can make adjustments if we need to keep things going. So the same concept would be having flexibility in this interlocal agreement should one of us, whether it's us or whether it's Bargersville, identifies an avenue to fund work that is something that we either haven't contemplated yet or is outside, of course, would be outside of our current revenue sources and whatever restrictions those might have.
I go back to what you said under the previous discussion, that the project would just stop until you had a revenue available to make it work. So again, it's kind of the same premise here. What this says is you can do work without being repaid for it. And that's what I object to. And you clearly indicated in your first argument that you couldn't do that. So why would we continue to keep it in? Right? To me, it's a pretty simple point. To strike it out, it's not applicable. It's not lawful as far as MVH and LRS money. We know that. And I don't think it would be appropriate on any other fashion for us to spend money, especially with no parameters on how much you could. I mean, if it's just discretionary based on what you want to do, I'm not willing to leave that up to you to make that decision. For me, even $1 is the equivalent to $1 million. It couldn't be done or shouldn't be done. Agree?
I don't agree with that.
Huh?
I don't agree with that. I mean, it doesn't, I don't think we're talking major road projects here.
Well,
I think I know what you're getting at. You're saying $1 is $1 million. I'm saying that you help your neighbor. If they need a pothole fixed, they can't get to it and we go do it. And then the next week we have to have a pothole fixed and they do it. Luke's going to keep track of that. He always has. In the past, I think we have worked with other communities on this same phase. And this is one clause in it doesn't matter if it comes out or stays in. Okay? So it doesn't do any detriment to this at all to take it out. It does detriment to it because it's been in the first reading, we've already read through it. Now you want to pull it out, so it's going to have to start back over again.
Question in the first reading. But your point is not applicable because you're talking a pothole. Yeah, a pothole, he runs out, he's got a couple guys in a pickup truck and they throw a little patch material in a pothole. That's no big deal, and we know that goes on. Right. This doesn't say a pothole. This just says that he can do work without being repaid. So now if you want to leave that in there, then you tell me how much work you're willing to have him do with Johnson County taxpayer dollars that they're not going to get repaid for. Give me a dollar amount and then we'll see if that's.
Well, I'm going to ask Luke, what other road projects have we done for a different entity? Other than what we're talking about, very minor road repairs, emergency type repairs.
At most, yes. Where you would most likely see that cooperation between entities is winter maintenance, probably more than anything else. From a technical standpoint, there is probably a valid argument for we shouldn't plow this small section of road. From a realistic standpoint and an operation standpoint, we got to go to the end of the road to turn around and come back anyway. So maybe we won't salt it, but if we got to drive it anyway, we'll keep our snow plowed down. So from a technical standpoint, you could make an argument, and again, this needs to be clarified, but you could make an argument that we shouldn't do that, that some amount of taxpayer dollars that is being used in a place that it shouldn't. But in reality, it doesn't put us out. When we're not going to track, we were on that road for a minute and a half and then try to bill the other entity because they're doing the same thing to help us out as well.
So I don't think this is anything major that we're looking at. I think it's basically what Blue's talking about, is just keeping it very simple.
Well, if it's not major and it's simple, then you need to clarify what would be acceptable in a simple fashion and not major.
But that's almost an
And the only way you can
impossible
do
thing.
that is to attach a dollar amount, right?
How much does it cost to drive a truck? I guess a mile and a half at this instance, a half a mile at this instance. Now you've gone and defeated the purpose by having these guys put together dollar amounts, time-wise, to figure that out. In Bargersville, in retrospect, you get in some of these subdivisions that we mirror right next to each other, they're gonna push out some, we're gonna push out some. It's all a shared expense between the two entities.
And again, that's not my issue, and we know that that's currently being done, and that's no big deal. What I'm still contending is that you can't have a line item in there that says that he can do work and not be repaid.
But we have done it in the past, so what makes it any different in the future?
Is it right?
Is it wrong?
Yes, it's wrong.
In your opinion?
No, the state.
You don't think this goes on across the whole state of Indiana?
There's parameters on what he can do with his dollars. It's not me, the state put that on there.
And you're talking a dollar. You think the state is don't understand that goes on within communities that are willing to help out each other?
So my analogy would be, let's put a line item in there that says he can rob a bank. Well, you know, he's not going to.
That's a very extreme.
No, I know it's extreme, but it's relevant here. We know he's not going to do it, and we know it's illegal, right? So why would you put it in there? Well, let's leave it in there because he's not going to do it. We know he's a problem. Why would you leave it in there? That's the same premise that we're dealing with here. It's something that he legally can't do. Secondly, there's no way that we, being commissioners or council, would authorize him to do work for another government unit and not get repaid for it. So why leave it in there?
Why take it out if we've worked with that in the past?
I just give you all those reasons.
Okay, but given the confidence to who you're working with in this, that knows we're gonna do this, they're gonna do this.
So let me say this, what's the single worst thing that can happen by striking it? They have to go back and rehear it, and then we have to rehear it.
And this pushes it on down the road.
But the impact fees. that's gonna
6
be
months
long.
after everything has been adopted.
That's gonna be a long time of collection time, that's the worst, they would have to go back and rehear it. Bargersville County.
And if they don't agree to it.
Fine by me. I don't agree with the whole thing anyway.
I know that.
So as much as I might like to rob a bank, just because
Common sense says don't.
it does,
Okay.
yeah, but it depends. I heard I'm not gonna be here in 5 years though, so.
Or you might,
What you said earlier.
we might not be.
No.
You rob a bank, you could be here in 5 years.
There's one of us that probably 95% chance won't be. I guess Luke, before you get into that, I'm the net in a pickleball game going on right here. And I know that, and I don't like being the net because I'm gonna get hit by a stray ball here somewhere. My question would be to legal and I understand Ron's position, I understand Kevin's position, and I understand both of them, and they're both real. But I know you guys have reviewed it, you and Zach both, I think, and Zach probably done the most of it, I think. In your opinion, does striking it make a difference in the legality of it? And why is that?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. So actually, Zach, do you want to?
Because here's what, and just for the public to know, whoever's listening out there in Zoom world, striking it, this line from this would put the process back to the beginning and we have to start all over again. Is that correct? Or can we strike something without doing all that when we're talking one
So
sentence, basically?
Procedurally what's happened, this road maintenance interlocal agreement is a separate piece entirely from the impact fee ordinance. It just happens to be an exhibit. So you approved unanimously the road maintenance interlocal back in November, pending the resolution or legal research into this aspect that we're discussing right now. So it is just a piece of the impact fee ordinance at this point.
If it is stricken from that one sentence, I think we're talking about like
If
one
you
sentence.
strike it, you mess with one of the exhibits to the impact
So
fee
does that
ordinance
send it
itself.
all the way back to the process, or can both just
Not
agree?
necessarily. What we would want to make sure, and this is why we brought the road maintenance interlocal to you 3 months ago, because we wanted to have it resolved before it became an exhibit to this ordinance. So I guess in theory, if we have to go back with the road maintenance interlocal, it's an exhibit to the ordinance, so we have to talk about whether or not that ordinance would have to come in 2 weeks again, but maybe we could avoid it. We'll
Sheena, could you state your name for the record, please?
Sheena Johnson.
County attorney.
Zach Lang, Assistant County Attorney. My analysis is going to be a little bit more narrow. You know, from a legal standpoint, when we're drafting, it's current and future considerations. And Commissioner West's points are taken. Right now, there are things that Luke can and can't do with certain funds. It's reasonable, as he said, that new funds come in for these projects that don't have those prohibitions on them. I distinguish that with the robbing a bank line because there's really no reasonable scenario in the future where that becomes legal or necessary. But to Luke's point, some of these other funds in these projects, they need to happen and they may come in with an allowance that he can do some things that current funds don't allow right now. So I look at it a little bit differently, and that it's necessary too. It could be a detriment if we strike this and that scenario happens. He's got to come here for something that he otherwise is allowed to do.
Right.
So, Zach, give me an example of that. You said if we strike this, how would that hamper any future project?
As the
So
funds,
give me a project, for an example, where he's gonna do work in the future and not get repaid for it.
I can't answer that directly in that the fund sourcing that he has now, you're right, if we strike it, it has no difference. But we draft future facing and present facing. So if something new comes in that I can't contemplate today, I want to give Luke, in my opinion, I know that's not the decision maker, the ability to be flexible with that. Because I trust from a legal standpoint that his restrictions now keep him from doing otherwise illegal activities or prohibited activities.
But again, you're not giving me an example where he would do work in the future,
Right.
substantial work in the future, and not get repaid for it. When would that
I don't know
be?
that Zach can give that.
I can't get that.
You can't.
Maybe.
You're asking him to contemplate something that you need a
Right.
crystal ball for, and that's what we're saying. If you leave it open-ended, then at least you have the
Let
possibility.
me rephrase it then. At what point in the future would it be appropriate for him to do work for Bargersville and not get repaid for it?
We don't know.
We don't know. There's no way of knowing.
You don't know, or it's not right?
We don't know.
I don't know. I think the legal risk is minimal here, as we stated, and the flexibility that keeping it in grants, it outweighs the concern here.
Keeping it in doesn't grant him anything other than the right to do work and not get what he paid for, to use Johnson County tax dollars to improve another government unit's streets or roads and not get what he paid. And I still contend that legally he can't do that with MVH and LRS funds, and nor would I ever agree to an appropriation, and I don't think the council would ever agree to it.
Understood, but then in from the legal aspect, we don't know that funds that might come in the future might not be able to be used for that purpose
Yeah, and they could
at that
be.
time.
But there is, you're talking repayment, or you're talking payment for a project or whatever. You're talking payment. Here, that line on that says no payment. I mean, it can't be any more clear. It says without payment for services. We're not talking future dollars that might be appropriated to pay for something. We're talking, I don't know how it could be more, without payment for service. In other words, you're giving him, you're authorizing him the ability to do work on another government unit's property without being reimbursed.
But I don't think it's saying that.
It does. Read it, right there. Go to it.
No, I've read it. I think we're trying to do some kind of practical application to a legal document that we don't understand in its entirety. And that's why we depend on our attorneys to tell us what that means. And that's kind of what I'm doing, is I'm trying to depend on our legal counsel. And if it was just one or two, I could maybe argue with it, but I mean, it just legally, I don't think it makes any difference in the document unless I'm mistaken. That's, I guess, yes or no?
I would agree with that simply, yeah, there's not a practical difference.
I don't, I'm surely God in a different world here. 5 words. Without payment for the services. Man, give me an example. Just give me an
He just
example.
did. He said driving a plow down the road a half a mile. That's an example. That's an example, plain and simple.
And then how far can he go? It's arbitrary. You're giving him the ability. So what if he decides to do $1 million worth of pavement down there?
Is he gonna rob that bank? That's a hypothetical.
There's my point. I think what we need to be looking at more than what that verbiage is in there is do we trust whoever's in that position to make that decision in the future?
Laws aren't written on arbitrary trust of an individual.
Well,
They
something's
clearly define
already-
the abilities of what that person can and cannot do. It's not a trust factor. I trust Luke, but it's not a trust factor. What if he's not the next director? of the
That's what
highway
I'm
department?
saying. That's what we have to look at. Does that verbiage, if we change that verbiage, does that change anything if Luke's not the director? Does it change?
Anybody that we would appoint in that position, we would have the same trust level.
Yeah, but I'm talking about legality wise. Does it change that?
I mean, you're leaving some discretion to your highway director, so if Luke's not the one in that position, then I guess you have to trust the next
But we
guy,
leave
but-
some discretion to all our.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, you're not
Just-
subject matter experts in everything, you can't be.
So does striking that take any discretion away from them?
I mean, yeah, I mean, in the situation that Zach and Luke were describing, where sometime down the road, some funding source becomes available, then yeah.
You're talking
take that
about
away.
payment with future funds. That's not non-payment. You're talking about future payment. Well, non-payment.
So I think, as we touched on, in the analogy of robbing a bank, and how it's relevant is there's nothing that we put in here that can supersede whatever state law or state statute or commonly
It does supersede,
enforced.
Luke, it does supersede when it says without, can you use local road street funds and not get reimbursed for it?
No,
Okay,
not that I'm
so
aware
that
of.
right there, then, that right there says that you can't do that.
So for the robbing a bank analogy, let's add rob a bank in here. Does that mean that I can go rob a bank? Well, no, because we know that's against the law. So when I say
You can.
super,
You can, and you could use local road and street money and not get reimbursed, and that's against, not the law necessarily, but statute that allows you not, or tells you not to do that.
so the scenario that I envisioned when we originally put that in there would be a situation where one of us, whether it's the town or the county, has an opportunity to prioritize or complete some sort of project and has a revenue source available to do it. So it's not necessarily an issue of,
But
we are
going
gonna
back
do
to
all
what
of
you
the
said
work.
earlier, you said earlier, and we talked about that, I said, what if there's unequal application of the fees? In other words, we don't have our part, and you said, yeah, they could go ahead and put the money in, and in our future projections, we base it on future projections, and we would repay it, right? Is that what you said?
as long as that
So we're
revenue is
talking
there.
repayment, we're not talking about not repayment. So let's go back to your original scenario. They got 50%, we got 25, and they go ahead and do the project, and we just never pay them. Or conversely, we got the 50, they got the 25, we go ahead and do the project, they never repay us. Is that okay?
In that agreement, in that particular circumstance, our goal is to get back to 50-50, but revenue is not necessarily going to allow that to happen. If we continue to be lower than them, then us being able to pay them back, we're not going to be able to do. Vice versa, in that scenario, we may reach a point where we can't get to 50-50, or in this
But
4
you said
years
when
of
you
the
couldn't get to the 50-50, that the project stops.
it can't. If there's not enough revenue
I
between the
said
two of
can
us,
before you said it would.
if there's not enough revenue between the two of us to start a project phase, then yes, we would wait. If we're going to make the determination that we don't move forward with the project until we have the cash on hand to start it.
But you're talking payment there, not payment.
Well, payment if that revenue balances out in that scenario.
I think I made my point, you guys go ahead and do whatever you want, but I don't know how much more argument I can put in defense of striking that.
I just, and again, I hate being here. I don't see, and I'm not an attorney, even though that's what I was going to school for before I had to quit. So I do have some understanding of law, and I am able to read some things, and have had a few attorneys tell me I should have been a lawyer at some point in time. And I don't think striking that one sentence and sending this all the way back to the process is going to make any difference in the legality of the document to change anything. And if I thought it would, I would agree with Commissioner West to strike it and send it all the way back through. I just don't think, and no attorney I've talked to thinks that it would make a difference. And so I have to look at that too. I'm not offending Ron in his viewpoint of what that says, because I understand that viewpoint too. That said, I'm going to second that motion. And I think we have to look at it in the legality and the totality of the document in itself, because that's what we're questioning. We're not questioning Luke's ability to make that decision. And if we are questioning that ability for him to make that decision, then we put a requirement on Luke that he can't do anything without bringing it to us before it starts. And that if we want to take that trust away from Luke, then that's what we would do. Then it doesn't matter what the document says at that
This
point.
doesn't have any bearing on him moving forward with whatever, and he still has to get our approval. It doesn't have any bearing. I really struggle with those 5 words are so clear in their intent, and I really struggle with with the reluctance of this body and Luke and to the legal team in striking that, because the only thing in striking that would happen would be Barkersville Council would have to maybe rehear it again, and then it would come back and we'd rehear it again. And you're not gonna have impact fees for a good while. You're not gonna have impact fees for a good while, because it's gonna take a while to accumulate. And there's no project that's gonna be delayed or jeopardized in that occurrence of going back and having them rehear it and having us rehear it. It's a simple thing, and this reluctance is just, it blows my mind. I really can't understand it. Why this body or anybody would authorize any government, any Johnson County employee to spend money on another government's property and not get reimbursed. Just
Sheriff, can I ask you a question?
Unbelievable.
Do you ever cover Bargersville or Greenwood in any given circumstance for
That's not applicable. That's not applicable to what we're talking about here.
any Johnson County employee?
Hell, I might go up and help somebody in Greenwood do something, you know, that's not applicable. We're talking funding here. Somebody explain to me why you're so reluctant to strike that, because it's only a timing issue, in as much as you got maybe another 30 days before this thing would be finalized.
Our advice is just that it's low risk to keep it in there. So why would we go through the administrative trouble of vetting it back to the other bodies? That's just our opinion. And obviously the three of you are free to take it or leave it.
I think the reasoning is because we're in agreement that he can't spend his money or our tax dollars and not get reimbursed. So it's just that simple. Now, if you want to give him that flexibility, go ahead.
Well, and again, that's what I'm saying, is it because we don't trust our director to make the
It's not a matter
decision?
of trust, it's a matter of whether it's right or wrong. And or legal. Is it right? I mean, you, Commissioner Baird, of all people, I've heard you argue so many times the preservation of Johnson County taxpayer dollars. And now you're willing to sign an agreement that allows him to do that.
Well, no, I disagree with that interpretation of the document. We don't have a disagreement in the way funds are spent or not spent. I have a disagreement with you in the way you interpret the document and the statement that's in the document. It's a legal process, it's not a process of thinking common sense in what money can be spent and what can't. I think that's what you're not willing to really look at is the legality of the document. What does the legality do in the document? And that's what I'm trying to look at.
Here's the legality. Give me an example where you spend money and it's not appropriated by the council or comes through us. Even as simple as your credit card claims, we approve that. So give me an example where you can spend money and you don't have to get prior approval to do it.
On funds that are budgeted by the council during the budget process.
But they've been approved by the council, right? That's the budgetary process. But so give me an example where you can take $100,000 and just go spend it without getting some prior approval.
There isn't any.
There you go.
But we keep using these extreme numbers, Commissioner West.
Well,
You
I'll
keep
use
using
a dollar.
another.
No, I'll use a dollar.
No, you just said 100,000.
Well, use whatever number you want. So now this says without payment for services. So he can spend money without getting reimbursed and it doesn't have to be approved.
Do you not put I'm asking you just a simple question. You don't put your trust in Luke. If he gets all, no, just listen to me. I'm gonna take it to your hypothetical on the other side. If he gets $100,000 project, do you think he's gonna go ahead and do that without going through the proper approval process?
So.
I'm not asking that question.
I agree. So what's he gonna do? Now he wants to spend $100,000 fixing a street in Bargersville. He comes before us and says, here's what I wanna do, guys, I wanna spend $100,000 fixing the street down here in Bargersville, and we're not gonna get repaid for it. Are you okay with that?
I won't say no.
Well, there you go.
Okay, but I'm gonna say now, if he has to drop that plow and push another mile down the road, do you want him to stop and have an emergency meeting for us?
He's not gonna come for that.
Well, why not?
Well, that's
You're
not-
talking $1.
That's not an appropriation of funds.
Well, he just spent county taxpayer dollar on a Bargersville street.
The guy driving.
In
the truck-
kind.
The guy driving the truck's getting paid anyway, so that's already been appropriated.
But that's, that just got stirred up there in the mix.
Yeah, you confirmed what I've been saying all along, when I said he comes before us for 100,000, what'd you say? No.
But you're not giving him the flexibility to have this guy drop that plow or pull it. Or, but that's what I'm talking about. I think the discretion with Luke.
If you think dropping a plow and running 2 blocks is equivalent to spending $100,000, you're in the wrong realm.
But what did I say? Did I ask the permission, the grant, the trust that we put in our directors to have that authority?
We're not talking trust here.
Okay, we're never gonna get any place on this.
Well, because again, we're talking about the legality of the document. We're not talking about an opinion or confidence in Luke. And that's, I keep going back to that, and we want to kind of shove away from that is it's the legality of the document. So I'm going to pull my second. And here's what I'm assuming I can do that. Can I?
I don't think there's a motion, so.
Yeah, emotion.
I'm
Yeah,
Did I? I think we just went in.
It was a long time
3
ago.
minutes ago.
Emotion.
It was many.
Emotion.
Yeah.
It was on the interlocal, guys.
It was emotion on number 1. There was no motion on number 2.
Okay, I showed a motion. But, so right now we have no motion.
Tell me what you're thinking.
Table it.
Okay.
Till the next meeting, and I'd like a chance to take that document, and I'd like to get another opinion on it, which I think is gonna end up in agreement with the opinion we already have, but at least that way we've done our due diligence. Are you good with that?
Is that gonna satisfy you, Commissioner West?
It may not satisfy me, but it'll satisfy me.
Okay.
And obviously on the net,
Yeah, that's true. You are in that.
so
I still wanna be in the same
Well,
position in 2 weeks.
I believe in the research you did and the research I did. I understand that, but I'd like to get one more opinion if everybody's okay with that. And then since I'm gonna be the guy getting beat up with the pickleball, then let me at least do that.
Go on.
I don't, is another 2 weeks gonna kill us?
If it's only 2 weeks, not necessarily. If we get to that point, and the answer is no, we can do, if that was make you comfortable. If we do get an opinion that we need to change it, then understand that.
I will have that by tomorrow.
That puts out how soon we can start collecting.
I understand. I will have that by tomorrow. I will have that opinion, and then at that point in time, I'll notify our legal counsel that there's an opinion different. That we can do that. Can we table? Motion to table?
So,
I would only ask, in seeking another opinion, that I be a part of that.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't, the opinion's not gonna change the legality of the document. That's what I'm trying to get at, and that I can prove, that the opinion's not gonna change the legality of the document. That's all I'm concerned about, is the legality of the document. We can have, all of us have our opinion, right or wrong, they don't stink. Have a motion and a second to take any further discussion.
one other further discussion. To speed this process, if you'll have an answer tomorrow, would later in the week work for a quick meeting to keep us on track? I mean, just, we have meetings, we've had numerous last year. I mean, I just want to keep this thing on track, because you've got other entities working on this also on another side.
Just from a procedural standpoint, town meets tomorrow. So we were trying to kind of stay about the same time frame, which is why we targeted this meeting and then their meeting tomorrow.
In that regard too, I brought this up and questioned it just as vehemently a month ago as I have today.
But then you voted to approve,
Why
though.
wasn't nothing done then? Why are we back here again? There's been
They're
no,
only back here today because it's an exhibit to the impact fee ordinance, that's why. Otherwise, it wouldn't have come back in the packet or anything like that.
anybody talk to Bartersville Council about it, or their town manager?
We negotiated the interlocal itself with the town manager and with the council.
Anybody talk to them specifically about the issue I've raised here today?
But I think it was, I think when we motioned and approved it at the last meeting.
No, you didn't.
No, you voted for it.
No, I never voted for this language here.
Right, you voted you voted in favor of the road maintenance interlocal agreement. It was 3-0, and it was, like I said earlier in the meeting, pending the resolution of our research.
Which that resolution was legality of what the thing said, not opinion. I guess what I'm saying, they did what they were asked to do under our approval.
Okay.
But this just links to that, I guess. I just think at this point in time with the contention that I think further clarification. And motion and second to table. Any further?
Would we be in favor of having another meeting later on?
I would be.
Okay. I mean, okay. All right.
Yeah,
We
I
have to
think,
have 48 hours.
So
I'll move quick.
then just set a meeting for Wednesday.
Well, you can't, you gotta advertise.
48 hours.
Yeah, well,
Maybe we could set a
Friday
record.
might be the
Maybe
early.
we could set a record on that meeting.
might be-
I doubt it.
Let's, have a motion and a second to table. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries to table.
That all?
You can stand there for a little bit longer.
I don't think I can.
No, I didn't aim to keep you up there that long.
Does that count as steps?
It felt like it.
No, that's a beat. LHD Consulting Services Agreement,
Well, I read through this and
pending legal.
yeah, pending legal. And I noticed that their fee adjustment was not in accordance with what we had agreed to. And Michael, I talked to him this morning, we'd agreed a $50 a month increase in their fee, not $166.67. And so he was gonna send a revised
We
machine.
did, actually. I haven't looked at it yet.
And so the agreement will be revised to reflect the $50 a month
50 instead of
increase.
166. Okay.
Other than that, go ahead.
I guess I would approve pending legal and
Yeah.
the changes that have taken place this morning.
Have a motion and a second. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 2021 contract for county litigation attorney William Barrett Kowski.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Etiquette Group, professional consulting services for building envelope, masonry repairs, phase 2.
Dan Cartwright, project manager. As you recall back, I think it's December 21st, we received bids to do work at community corrections. Prior to that time, Jason and I spent a lot of time going through the entire building as directed by Commissioner Baird to go in and find out what that building needs to be safe and structurally sound. So that's what we did, and we developed a prioritization level of activities that we thought, or work that we thought would be, and the procedure on the time frame when those things could be done. And in a few minutes, we're going to hopefully award 3 of those contracts in the first phase. What I'm talking about now is the second phase. And the second phase, again, we're talking about masonry repairs and analysis, and that has some structural concern to the whole stability of the outside walls. So I don't feel comfortable in making any decisions along that line, and for that reason, I'm asking you to award a contract to Etika to do construction, design analysis, technical specifications, and inspections to ensure the work's done in the right fashion.
No, I mean, I've seen that. I think we need to bring professional engineers in at this point, technical professional. So that's a motion, yes.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Award of Juvenile Detention Center bids and approval of contracts for masonry repairs, roof replacement, and boiler replacement.
Again, as I previously stated, back in December 21st, we took bids for what we thought were the first and the top priority as far as repairs to the Juvenile Detention Center. We received multiple bids for each section of this work, each phase of this work, and I'm looking at now, based on the review of those bids I received on December 21st, to award 3 contracts. One to Wells Masonry for $138,600 for masonry repairs to the west elevation. One to New Tech Roofing for $199,500 for new roof, and also metal coping all the way around the building. And the third one is to Saxon Mechanical for $105,225, excuse me, for boiler and water heater replacement.
Guess I would ask more towards Commissioner West or Baird. We've been following back and forth on issues, same commissioner. Funding on this, we have it. We're within budget of what was budgeted for this.
We're actually under budget, and that's why we're looking at that second phase.
So look at that to stabilize that up.
Yeah, we've done real well on that.
Yeah, we were considerably under budget.
Yeah, good.
We're good.
All right, so I move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have, we do 7, 8, 9,
No, we're
10.
gonna do them individually, because I have to read the
Okay,
quotes.
well, let's go with the first, the park roof audit then.
Yes, the quotes for Johnson County Park Roof High Building. We had an extra hand at $27,650, Cornerstone Contracting at $21,483, and the low bid was CW Sneed Company at $21,450. So I'd ask that you would make some decisions on that agreement for the low bidder.
I recommend that a little bit on that, on all these actually, get that out.
Oh, and it's-
I know.
I would second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Roof J.
Roof J, an extra hand, $27,650. Cornerstone Contracting, $22,523, and the low bidder was CW Sneed Company, $22,450.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the low bid. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Roof K.
3 quotes for Roof K, an extra hand at $27,650. Cornerstone Contracting at $22,523, and the low quote is from CW Sneed Company at $22,450.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion second to approve low bid. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Roof L.
For Roof L, we have 3 quotes. The first is from an extra hand, $55,695. Cornerstone Contracting at a quote of $44,026, and the low quote was from CW Sneed Company at $43,382.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion second to approve low bid. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. COVID-19 leave extension.
Well,
Discussion.
yes, as you know, the FFCRA expired. It's the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act that was implemented by the United States Congress. Expired on December 31st, and administratively we'd approved another month to kind of get us through the holidays. And your discussion today will be whether or not you wish to continue with another extension of that leave policy. The way we had it was it didn't give an additional number of hours. We were using the same 75 to 80 hours depending on your schedule that was originally implemented on April 1st. Question for you is whether you want to continue that through February, knowing that there's possibly a chance that there would, yes, Ron's nodding, an inclusion of another leave provision in the stimulus package that I think that Congress will take up here in the next couple of weeks. But right now, you're within your rights to do it or not do it. So that's what you.
What would that extension be to? What date in February? The last day of February is
That's what I would recommend at this point. That way, if in the event that Congress doesn't make a move, you could reconsider again at your second meeting in February and decide if you want to extend it.
clarification. We're not adding any hours to that. It still remains that they've used so many hours, they've only got so many hours left.
That's how we set up the original extension. Yes.
Make sure I see.
Well, and the thought process was that full-time employees would have received the 5 personal days. So in the event that they used some of their COVID leave last year because they had a COVID-related event, then at least they would have a little bit of a safety net. So.
Just another comment for motion on this is we need to think about this and understand that our employees have all been staying here working when a lot of other places shut down. So that's First County. So I appreciate that fact. Do we have a motion to extend to the end of February?
I would make a motion to extend to the end of February, so.
A motion second. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Claims and credit card.
Whoops.
Oh, did I miss something?
Changing your February.
Oh, yes, that was for me. And what I would like to entertain is if we could make that a morning meeting like we have done meetings in the past, 10 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock, because I have to fly out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 8th, and that would be tight coming from a meeting to there, but I would like to attend that meeting. So.
Well, we'll have to debate on that because I'm flying back in that day. And I'm waiting to see what time I fly back in.
There could be a possibility that 2 of us won't be here.
I'll run them thing. You're talking about a Zoom meeting, they zooming in, they zooming out.
Okay. Well.
If we move to 10, I can guarantee you I'm here. So that would be 2 here.
Yeah, but I don't think I will be back by 10. I don't know yet. I'm waiting to hear. I know we fly out that morning, but I don't know.
There's a possibility he might not be back in by 3 the way flights are.
Yeah, I don't know. And that's all with cancellations and delays and all kinds of stuff. Can we wait to maybe address that at our next meeting?
We can.
If you're gonna have a special meeting, then yeah.
Yeah, and we'll negotiate something. I mean, if I'm still there, I can zoom in. If I'm not, then I just won't be in attendance and you guys can go ahead and do it. But I'd like to be at the meeting.
No, I agree. But if we move it to 10, then I know I can be here. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If we move it to, if we leave it at 3.
No, I don't think 3. I mean, if you could move it to noon or something.
Let's see, what's the latest you could do?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if noon might be, and I just gotta see what time I get back.
1 o'clock.
Yeah, maybe plenty of time to get to the airport.
Yeah, because I'll just leave it from here.
Okay, if we could table that till the next special meeting we'll have this week.
Oh, the other one we're gonna have, I would just say go ahead and change it to the
I
next.
think they don't know for sure what time.
I don't know what for sure. I haven't got a,
No, you gotta wait.
I gotta wait for my boss to give me my direction.
We can just hold off for the next meeting.
And claims and credit card.
Okay. Well,
He's got a list.
One of the problems I'm having on the credit card manifest is that sometimes they don't put descriptions down, such as CASA had $3,397 worth of purchases, no description. Prosecutor, same thing. I just, the only real claim question I had was the sheriff had a charge for $599.98 for a push spreader. I'm just curious what a push spreader is.
Probably a salt spreader.
Salt spreader.
It's
Is it a
good.
salt spreader?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, maintenance item.
Yes.
Other than that, the only thing that, again, I want to bring up is, and I brought this up before, and I don't know whether the commissioners can limit or prohibit credit card users from making purchases from Amazon or not. But I would just ask that these departments limit their purchases from Amazon and or not purchase at all. And I'll give you the credit card charges this month are 59 purchases made at Amazon. Out of the credit card charges, 59 purchases made there. And I say that for two reasons now. The first time I've made an issue is that we need to support local businesses. And a lot of this stuff that's bought on Amazon could be bought locally without, and still get delivery and all of that. I don't know about cost comparisons, but the expediency and all of that could be well handled through local vendors. But I have a second issue now with Amazon, and I don't know how much you are aware of this, but on Inauguration Day, Amazon said to the Biden administration that we're going to give you all of our resources now to help in the distribution of the COVID vaccine, something they could have done 2 months earlier. So for 2 months, they withheld their ability to help the United States government in the distribution of this vaccine. I heard one commentator say they got blood on their hands. I don't know about that, but it's disgraceful in what these huge companies are doing. And Amazon is no friend of the conservatives in this country. They moved to limit free speech. You probably saw that where Parler and some of the other conservative media outlets were taken down through Amazon and Google and Apple. So I'm just saying to all of our department heads and elected officials, if you buy anything from Amazon, you're supporting a company that is against freedom of speech in this country, is not willing to help any government, regardless of their particular political beliefs, and destroying at the same time, I think, small businesses. So just want to get that out there again, get it off my chest. So I move to approve claims as presented. Sorry. But this is the last time I'm going to approve claims where there's Amazon purchases. I'm just going to say that. Going forward, if they make a purchase from Amazon, I'm not going to approve it. Yeah. On my soapbox today.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I understand where you're coming from, Ron, and again, on a personal basis, I sold all my stock Amazon. I've done any business they're connected to, I got rid of it. I don't use Amazon. We've canceled all our accounts personally, but that's something that I don't think I can relate as a commissioner to the county in the way that elected officials and them do the business. There's some things I know that the only place we can get those are Amazon. And some of that involves the sheriff's office in what they purchase because of the specialty needs of that. And I won't go any further than that, but it just would be hard to say they can't do that, and it would be hard for me not to approve that. I think everybody we have has listened, and I think they'll do everything they can in their power to limit.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
But there's one way we can resolve all those issues, and I'll go back to it. We don't fund credit cards any more than we don't have to approve claims. So just saying, I want to throw that out there because I've been 8 years now, I've been trying to get rid of credit cards. So anyway, have a motion, a second. Any further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Because whether we approve the claims or not, they're gonna be paid.
Yeah,
So, because we don't have any option at this point. Real quick, just, and I know the council's doing this, and I want to put this out there to hopefully save us some time and some meetings down the road, and save people coming to our meetings that are busy right now. We have grants and contracts and things like that just renew every year. There's no legal change in the jargon, maybe a little bit in price difference or grant amounts and things like that. But what I'd like to do is maybe have a general procedure where they can email that information to Sheena, Barb, or me, or whoever, and bring that information forward so they don't have to personally attend these meetings on a general procedure. So I would like to have a general procedure section in our meetings, just mass approve that stuff without individually going through that. Would that be something you guys would?
I mean, I'd be willing to do it. I would still like to see a list of,
Oh, absolutely.
you know, just with a list provided, if we can cover it in one meeting and just go boom and it's done.
And it's pretty well the same ones every year.
Yeah, I know, and they're pretty much the same amount, so they get more grant money.
Yeah, it's been the same since I've been here, and I see a lot of them, so.
And I mean, it'll more rely on our legal department.
And I sign a lot of grants, and I hope people understand that.
We're happy
They
to
don't
look
have a
into it
choice.
to see what you could include on some consent agenda type of thing. We'll look into it, see what.
They're approved, but I'm seeing them because I'm signing them, is what I'm saying. So, anyway, just want to put that out there, so that's what we can.
Simplify everybody else's lives. So that we don't have-
Any public comment?
well, today, we have two gentlemen here from Willow Lakes, and they're here to give you a little more insight into the condition of the streets up there in that particular subdivision. I also have a letter here from Bill Shackle, is that right, Bruce? Just outlining again, all of the problems that they're having with the concrete streets up there, even though we're working and have done some work on the asphalt conversion. And the reason that the person and the president of the HOA's back there, I forgot his name, I'm sorry.
I'm the vice president, Dan Ryan.
Oh, Dan, no,
The president.
vice president. I had talked before, and I'm to the point now where I'd like for Sheena and Zach maybe to look into this going forward. We had that $5 million bond that we just paid off in December that was used on the Whiteland Road expansion or widening. And I brought this up before. I'd like to see the commissioners consider now renewing that bond for $5 million, using the wheel tax money to retire that bond like we did before, as a part of the retirement fee, and then also go to the council and see if there's a possibility, once the jail expansion's done, that if we could use some of that LIT money there for move it into road repair, to see if that's a possibility. I don't know why it wouldn't be a possibility, but then.
Because it's for public safety.
Yeah, but I didn't know if they could redirect it or not. But public safety, streets should be public safety. But anyway, we'll look at that. But the emphasis I want to put on is getting this $5 million bond so that we can get, we've got several subdivisions up there that the streets are just terrible. They're to the point where there is a semblance of hazardness associated with it, in as much as the concrete pieces are flying up as people traverse on those streets. But anyway, I wanted to bring that up. I'm proposing that the county legal team look into what we need to do in the way of issuing a $5 million bond or renewing that bond, whichever, and ask them to do that. So that we'll have that maybe in our February, some point in February meeting. Would you gentlemen, either one, want to come up and address the body?
Yes.
Please, prior to that, remember that we're under public comments, so try to limit comments to 5 minutes.
Okay. I'll try to keep it very brief.
We've lengthened it out enough, right?
Yeah, well, thank you. And I appreciate, Mr. West, your awareness of this. And I know you've been down and looked at it. My name is Bruce Boltman, and I'm on the Willow Lakes Homeowners Association board. And this has been a concern to our community for years. And in June of 2019, there was a meeting here, and it was acknowledged at the meeting that, you know, road work needed to be done. And we've kind of been waiting on this bond reissue that we were told, or left believing anyway, that would be a mechanism for, you know, funding additional road repairs. Now, since the 2019 meeting, there have been some repairs. Some of the worst spots have been repaired. There's still a lot to go. There's a lot of really poor streets in the neighborhood that, as you mentioned, they're cracking up, they're breaking up. And I have some pictures that just save some time. I'm sure you can see lots of crummy streets if you want. But I'm here to just try to appeal that this really needs to be done. We appreciate what's been done. I know there's supposed to be some additional work done that's scheduled this spring that is through the community crosswalks. I think it's 50% funded. Yeah, which, you know, that's great. And I think some of the street repairs that were done last year may have been part of that. But we would encourage you, anything you can do to help, be it the bond reissue, if the amount of work can be doubled through the other program, we need your help. And we're taxpayers as well. We've paid taxes for many years, and there really hasn't been much done up until the last few years on it. And there's a whole lot more that needs to be done. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, let me just go up here for a minute or two. My name is Dan Ryan. I'm the Vice President of the Willow Home Association. By the way, Mr. West, I used to work with your Bob at ABF.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've lived in Willow Lakes 32 years, and you know, our streets have been a problem for many years. My son's now 39. He's an attorney working in Chicago, but I remember his little kid would say to me, "You know, our streets look terrible." A little 9-year-old kid would tell you that. I guess I'm just basically here to say it's our turn. You know, the additions got some age on it. It's turning over with new people that are investing in their homes. They've done some repairs, which are great. They've done some fixes. It kind of reminded me back when I was a kid. My old man complained to the county commissioners. They would the precinct committeeman, and they would just throw some oil on our alley and throw some gravel on top of it. They've done it a few times in our additions, which has left a kind of a scar on the streets. But anyway, like Bruce says, we had a meeting back in June of 2019 here, and had a lot of people here to plead our case. Unfortunately, today with COVID, you know, there aren't many here today, but it's our turn. And lastly, I just want to publicly thank Sheriff Burgess. We've had a problem with overnight street parking in Willow Lakes, and with his assistance and us working together, that problem's getting cured. And I appreciate his help. So that's all. Thank you.
Well, as both gentlemen mentioned, we've got a number of subdivisions up in that area that have concrete streets, and they've gone 30+ years without any maintenance because the concrete was good for a long period of time. But what we're doing now, the highway department's trying to do an asphalt conversion, and in the process of doing that, what we've got is kind of a checkerboard effect up there now, where you've got concrete streets, and then you'll have a section of asphalt, and you go concrete, and another section of asphalt. And I think the use of the bond money, the $5 million that I mentioned, what that would do is give us the ability in some of these subdivisions to maybe go ahead and make it uniform. In other words, get all the streets done so they're all asphalt, and you don't have that checkerboard effect. There's no illusion that $5 million is going to do all the additions up there. It's not, but it would go a long way to expedite this work and get it done much more quickly than what we'd be able to do through our normal road maintenance funding that we have available. So that's kind of where we're at. I won't name off all the subdivisions, but there's a number of them up there. The streets are really in bad shape.
Yeah, I do appreciate you coming in, but I drive a lot of streets, I drive a lot of additions, and I have since I've been here, because that's just kind of what we do. But we have a lot of subdivisions that, besides north, that need work. So we also need to consider and understand that we have to be fair in that process of how that's divvied out on repairing those street, repairs. Oh, stop.
Turn your phone on silent before you enter the.
It is on silent, that's my timer going off. So we need to be fair in applying those funds, whatever funds we have, to all those additions. Because I know down in my area, we get a little bit of abuse compared to some places up north. So I just want to make sure we understand that wherever we do those repairs, if that's being done, it needs to be in a fair process, that all additions are looked at. Because we have some really bad streets in a lot of different areas. And also understand that sometimes appearance doesn't necessarily affect functionality of the roads. So the checkerboard look to me is a bad thing if it makes the roads more safe as we get through that process of getting those roads done everywhere that needs to be done. There may be some places that will have to have that checkerboard appearance for a period of time, even if we do a bond. So we got to understand that sometimes appearance doesn't affect functionality. I know some streets we can use chip and seal on to repair, some we can't. And I think Luke would agree with that, because I've been told that in many areas where people are complaining about chip and seal. Some areas it can work, some areas it can't. So just a lot of things to consider there. And I want you, gentlemen, to understand that whenever we make those type of decisions, we have to consider all that and the functionality of where those funds go. Even if we do get a little more money, doesn't mean that all those streets are going to get repaired in one addition.
Well, and what I was referencing in part was just some continuity in that. In other words, if you're going to do a street, do the whole street, and not talking about necessarily being able to do the whole neighborhood at one time, but just get continuity into it, so you don't have asphalt strip here, concrete here, another asphalt strip, and then concrete up to the intersection. But by being able to take at least one street or wherever you're going to do the work and do the whole thing, so that you don't have that checkerboard appearance.
But complaining about appearance compared to safety is too.
Well, no, there's a safety issue too involved with this. I mean, I get comments, Bruce can tell you, chunks of concrete flying up and hitting cars or individuals.
That's a safety.
Bruce,
that's a safety. That's a safety issue.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That's not an appearance issue. That's a safety issue.
Yeah.
Well, and it all kind of goes together in.
Bruce,
And
I take your mask down.
Oh, yeah. Getting used to keeping it on. And I did bring some pictures that I can share that maybe we'll add to the discussion. Actually, this is a street in front of my house.
And I've seen those pictures.
Yeah, and there's loose pieces of concrete. When the kids go by on their bikes and so forth,
that's a safety issue. That's not a checkerboard appearance issue.
Well,
that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But I think the other part of that is when we do have a section that's repaired, what we're seeing, and once again, I've got some pictures here to share with you, where that cut is made, oftentimes it's breaking apart, and then it's, even what was put in 2019 is starting to deteriorate, because I think a lot of it has to do with subgrade and water coming up. Then you've got the pieces of older street next to the new street. It's like, well, this isn't accelerated, how quickly this is deteriorated. And I think we've got 11 different sections of street in the neighborhood, and that's not including the old or the pre-concrete sections that were replaced, because for years it was just a little section of concrete would be fixed, and then they moved over to the asphalt. So when we do just these small sections, they look fine, they're functional for a while, but they do deteriorate much quickly. And once again, I have pictures here I can leave with you, you can look at.
You're welcome.
So I would like you to consider that. I think what you're saying, Mr. West, makes a whole lot of sense. If larger sections of street would be done, it would eliminate that as opposed to just cutting out one little section, fixing it, and then moving on. Because often, even those panels next to it, I don't know why they really left this, but somebody's made that decision. You'll see that in these pictures, in some of the different techniques that have been used to repair it. So, should I give these?
If you want to just leave them here, or there, we'll get them.
Okay.
But just again, I'll reiterate that there's maybe other subdivisions in the same circumstances that we also need to look at. That's all I'm saying. I just want to be fair that we have to be fair throughout the county as we discuss.
Again, no, I want one more. I just want to say one more thing. I know our libraries are only open for curbside checkout on books and appointment only on the use of the computers in there. I would like to see the respective library boards work towards getting these back open, at least for practice what the state's preaching. I said 25 people could be in there. Hopefully we'll move to orange, that'll move up to 50 people. But get these tools we have back out into the community and let them start, the general public start getting back into these facilities.
Amen.
Amen.
I've been saying that for months. I don't know why we're not using what we have. My comment is we just need to replace those.
Everybody else is opening them safely and securely. Why can't we? So
we just don't look at things the same way sometimes. Agreed. Totally.
now I'm making a motion to adjourn.
No.
Oh, we got Pam. Hold on. Retract.
I gave a request.
Oh, yeah, you get.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know if we had.
So you gave it to the wrong guy.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know, I thought maybe we had to put it on the agenda, but anyway, Pam has an employee, Lynn Kelly, who has 3 days that she wants to carry over until March 31. And as you guys know, Pam's department right now is really hurting with some of the COVID absences that they're experiencing with some other issues. So if we don't have to have that on the agenda, I would move that we allow Lynn Kelly to carry over 3 days until March 31.
I would second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further? Hearing none under new business. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Now I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We're adjourned.